morning. The House Elections Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Tsernoglou.
Here.
Representatives Wagella.
Here.
Hope.
Here.
Colazar.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Churches.
Present.
Smith. DeBoyer. Here. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Today I am proposing an additional committee rule regarding testimony to clarify our procedures. You each have a copy of the proposed rule at your seat. Representative Churches moves to adopt the committee rule. Will the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to adopt the proposed committee rules, Chair Tsernoglou.
Yes.
Representatives Wagella.
Yes.
Hope.
Yes.
Colazar.
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Churches.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
DeBoyer.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The committee rules are adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative DeBoyer makes a motion to adopt the minutes from the October 31, 2023 meeting. Without objections, the minutes are adopted. For today's agenda, we will have testimony on House Bills 5550 and 5551. We will now have testimony from Representative Arbit on House Bill 5551. Welcome, Representative Arbit.
Good morning, Chair Tsernoglou, Vice Chair Wagella, and esteemed committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on my bill, House Bill 5551. Before I begin, Madam Chair, I want to thank you for your partnership in aiding me in the crafting of this bill, from your support of my initial idea back in late October to coordinating meetings with relevant stakeholders in the Department of State. Your support and those of your legislative director, Alex, have been crucial to getting us to this point. And I know that I and my legislative director, Joanne, who also deserves a lot of credit for the research and drafting of this bill, appreciate it immensely. So thank you. So my testimony is going to be relatively short and sweet because this bill is quite simple and I hope is common sense for everyone. The basic premise is this. Our democracy is sacred, our electoral process is sacred, and individuals who have shown a willingness to abuse, undermine, interfere, or corrupt the electoral process by violating Michigan election law have no business overseeing our state's elections, let alone certifying results. Period. End of story. That's why I introduced this bill, House Bill 5551, which prohibits individuals convicted of certain election-related crimes from serving on the Board of State Canvassers or any county's Board of Election Canvassers. I believe, and I hope I am proven correct, that members across this House can agree that we need to work to ensure that every step of our election process is made resilient to threats and malign actors. My bill to insulate state and county canvassing boards from individuals who have demonstrated a willingness to violate election law is a critical next step in our ongoing fight to do just that. I will note that Michigan election law already prohibits individuals who have committed election-related crimes from serving as election inspectors at precincts. So enforcing that same requirement for state and county canvassers, an even more critical role, is common sense. HB 5551 aligns statutory treatment of the role of canvassers with election inspectors and will hopefully prevent scenarios of chaos, uncertainty, and distrust in our elections, at least as far as the canvassing process is concerned. Of course, this legislation is proactive and prospective. It is my sincere hope that we will never see someone with a proven record of violating election law ascend to this role, and that no governor or county official would ever appoint such a person to this position. But I don't believe that we can ever leave the sanctity of our democracy up to the goodwill of partisan functionaries. We must enshrine statutory guardrails to protect our elections. That is exactly what my bill will do. I was motivated to introduce this bill after we voted on Senate Bill 529 in the House last fall, introduced by Senator Moss, which, among other items, changed the structure and eligibility requirements for the Board of State Canvassers. It struck me that no place in Michigan law prevents an individual who has already demonstrated a lack of fidelity to Michigan election law from serving in this critical canvassing role. So HB 5551 remedies that, building on the strong framework laid by Senator Moss and Chair Tsernoglou last year. I will close by restating a point that I made earlier. Individuals who have shown a willingness to violate Michigan election law have no business overseeing our state elections, let alone certifying results. Period. End of story. Thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you and the committee might have.
Thank you, Representative Arbit. Do we have questions? Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Hari, thanks for coming in.
Sure,
Testifying. It's just a rather simple question. Would it be prudent to perhaps look at the idea of a timeline on this. And the reason I would ask that is we're basically saying forever with this legislation. And we don't even put that standard in place when it comes to holding elected office, right? We have a 20-year potential exclusion for an individual that's committed a felony that falls into certain categories from perhaps being elected to hold office. My question is, would it be beneficial, because I'm not opposed to this in concept, but maybe there needs to be something that's more in line with that philosophy of not necessarily forever, but with a window of time. Just a thought.
Well, if you're asking me if it would be beneficial, I don't think it would be.
So,
No.
so it'd be okay to be inconsistent with regard to these kind of things?
I don't think it is inconsistent. In fact, as I said, Michigan law already states that election inspectors could not have violated election law to serve as election inspectors. I'm not really interested in legislation that gives an out for someone who's done it before.
Okay.
I don't care what time period has elapsed. I don't think
So there's
this
no,
is a privileged position,
right.
Representative, and I don't believe that anyone who has shown a lack of fidelity to upholding our election process or our democracy should be anywhere near it.
I could possibly agree with you if that was a consistent position, but unfortunately it's not a consistent
Well,
position.
I mean, again, MCL 168-677 states that an individual must not be knowingly appointed or permitted to act as a precinct election inspector if the individual or any member of the individual's immediate family is a candidate for nomination or election to any office at the election or has been convicted of any felony or election crime.
Right.
So any felony.
I'm just saying
This
consistency.
is, well,
Yeah.
I believe that
Do you
this
have
is
another
consistent.
question, Representative
No, I'm
DeBoyer?
good, thanks.
Thank you. Are there other questions for Representative Arbit? All right, I see no other questions. Thank you for your testimony, Representative Arbit. We do have Kim Murphy-Kovalik from Voters Not Politicians, who would also like to speak in support of House Bill 5551. I believe she is on Zoom.
I'm here.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
There you are. You're a little bit quiet.
Okay. Is this better?
Yes, yep, that is good. Welcome and thank you for testifying. We welcome your testimony.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. My name is Kim Murphy-Kovalik, and I am the State Programs Director at Voters Not Politicians. Chair Tsernoglou and members of the committee, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about this important legislation today. And thank you to Representative Arbit for introducing House Bill 5551. I'm here on behalf of Voters Not Politicians and the thousands of people who have volunteered with us all over the state of Michigan to speak in support of House Bill 5551. We find that the offenses listed in this bill should unquestionably prohibit an individual from serving on a board of state canvassers or county canvassers. The cited offense provisions in HB 5551 are serious election-related offenses. Some of the state statutes, and this is not a complete list, cited in the bill include false statements and forgery in connection with an absentee voter application, unlawful interference of an election inspector by a challenger, false affidavit filed by a candidate, unlawfully disclosing election results before 8 p.m. on election day, false statement in a post-election statement, and more. Any public official, whether appointed or elected, who is unwilling to faithfully serve the will of the voters is unfit to hold this office. It is the ministerial, clerical, and non-discretionary duty of county and state canvassers to certify election results based solely on the number of votes cast by Michigan voters. For the same reason that you wouldn't leave a fox in charge of the hen house, it is illogical to allow those who have already been convicted of election-related crimes to have control over future elections. Our democracy cannot survive if those chosen to uphold it are simultaneously trying to undermine it. As Representative Arbit said, this is relatively simple and straightforward legislation, and that concludes my testimony. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy-Kovalik. Does anyone have questions for Ms. Murphy-Kovalik? We have no questions. Thank you so much for joining us. We will now have Aaron Shore from the Michigan Department of State join us to testify in support of House Bill 5551. Welcome, Ms. Shore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members. I think the bill sponsor and Kim have already spoken very eloquently to the importance of House Bill 5551. We're happy to be here in support on behalf of the department. I think this is one of those bills where ideally you would never need to have legislation stating something that seems like common sense, but unfortunately with some of the challenges we've seen in our elections in recent years, we do think it's important to put these guardrails in place, and so I'm happy to take any questions that you all might have.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Ms. Shore? I see no questions. Thank you for joining us. All right. The Elections Committee will now go at ease at the call of the chair.
The Elections Committee will come back to order. We will now have testimony from Representative Tsernoglou on House Bill 5550.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wagella. I'm also joined here by Aaron Shore from the Michigan Department of State. And we also have Adam Fracassia, the regulatory manager for the Bureau of Elections, behind me if we have any questions that the two of us can't answer. But first, just a brief summary of House Bill 5550 and what it does and why it's needed. Currently in Michigan election law, when a petition for the recall of a state senator, representative, elective state officer, county official, or the Secretary of State is filed, it must be submitted to the Board of State Canvassers for a review prior to being circulated for signatures. As the law is written now, the Board of State Canvassers is required to meet between 10 and 20 days after a recall petition is filed, where they must vote on whether each reason for the recall stated in the petition is factual and of sufficient clarity. The same process applies to the Board of County Canvassers, who must meet when a petition for the recall of an elective county commissioner, township, city, village, or school official, district library board member, or metropolitan district officer is filed. The legislation will change the requirement for both the Board of State Canvassers and the Board of County Canvassers so that they are required to meet and vote on whether a petition is factual and of sufficient clarity between 10 and 40 days after a recall petition is filed, rather than between 10 and 20 days. This legislation will allow for the Board of State Canvassers and the Board of County Canvassers to handle recall petition determinations at their regularly scheduled monthly meetings, and rather than requiring the boards to meet multiple times a month, they will be able to handle all of the necessary recall petitions at their regularly or tentatively scheduled meetings. It is also of note that if either board does not meet, the petition is considered factual and of sufficient clarity. So the 10 to 20 day deadline can prove difficult if a member of either board is out of town or dealing with a family emergency. Seeing as these recall petitions are often filed on random days where the boards may have no advance notice, the 10 to 40 deadline provides the boards and Bureau of Elections staff with much needed flexibility. Simply put, this bill makes a logical change that allows these boards to operate under common sense timeframes rather than requiring that the boards and Bureau staff must always be on standby. The 10 to 40 day deadline will simply allow the boards to handle all of these recall petitions at their normally scheduled monthly meetings. And it's also worth noting that these are volunteer positions, so these are not paid staff positions, where they would sometimes have to meet, multiple times under the current rule, because we've definitely been seeing a lot of recall action as of late. I now would like to pass it along to Ms. Shore to add anything I may have left off.
Thank you. That was certainly a thorough explanation, and I do want to be clear that the bill would not change anything about the standard for dealing with the recall petition. It just would, as Representative Tsernoglou suggested, note that these are volunteers. I do think they, at least at the Board of State canvassers level, receive a small per diem, but that's not enough to ask them to keep their schedules open in the event that meetings have to crop up like this. So it has become a challenge at times to get quorum for special meetings when we need to hold multiple meetings per month, in addition to the challenge of staff needing to rearrange schedules and activity at the same time they're conducting multiple elections per year. So we appreciate your consideration of House Bill 5550 and happy to take any questions.
Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Chair. First, what statute are we referencing with regard to County Board of Canvassers reviewing recall petitions?
Michigan election law.
Can you tell me what statute that is?
Section 952.
It doesn't reference County Board of Canvassers.
It refers to the county election commissioners.
Ah, there we go. County Election Commission, not the County Board of Canvassers, which is what the statement through the entire testimony was, that it's the County Board of Canvassers. But that's not what it is. It's the County Elections Commission, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be clear that I wasn't missing that somewhere in the statute. So, you know, one of the reasons that I heard there was inconvenience, perhaps, or we couldn't meet a quorum, or they're not paid enough, or they're volunteers. Why are we, as elected officials who are potentially subjects of recall, why are we making a decision to make the process longer and more convenient for the parties that would make the determination, but we're not addressing making it longer and more convenient for the targeted official, for the constituent that is bringing the recall petition? They all have a timeline too. Local clerks have a timeline in reviewing signatures. County clerks have a timeline in reviewing signatures in validating the sufficiency or insufficiency of the petition. Why are we only looking at, we're really only looking at the State Board of Canvassers, to be honest, because in the statute that you referenced, there's a provision for a vacancy at the county level. If the clerk isn't there, a deputy clerk comes. If the treasurer isn't there, the sheriff or the register of deeds or the prosecutor comes. If the chief judge of probate isn't there, the circuit court judge comes. There's a provision to take care of all those things, but we're asking to add 20 days to a timeline. What is the only motivation behind this? I will get to my question, pardon me. Is the only motivation behind this is to make it more convenient for the State Board of Canvassers?
Would you like to speak to your motivation?
So there's several motivations. We definitely want to make it convenient for the State Board of Canvassers. We want to make it possible so that there are no circumstances in which a meeting won't be held and then a recall petition will be approved without them actually meeting. Because as I stated earlier, sometimes there's a recall petition filed every day, which could require them to have many meetings that month when they already have one monthly scheduled meeting where they're already planning to attend. So we do want to acknowledge the request of our bipartisan Board of Canvassers, as well as avoid any potential of recall petitions being approved that shouldn't be approved, which is what we would want for anyone who is going through this recall process, as well as respect the Department of State's, position on, being part of this process. We're not really extending, the process by a significant amount of time or preventing anyone from going, forward with that recall process.
I would disagree with that. Fundamentally disagree with that. A state representative is a 2-year term. There's only a 1-year window, 6 months in and not 6 months to the end that I can be recalled.
Mm-hmm.
So the truth is if I don't file a petition between July 1st and October 3rd of my first year in office, there's a possibility that with appeals in my rights for review, we can run the timeline out and end up, frankly, only landing on the November election 6 weeks before my term ends. And we're going to add 20 days to that. Or, I'm sorry, we're going to take 20 days away from that window of time by doing this. Like, I don't see, when a person volunteers to do something, they volunteer to do it. I'm trying to understand the motivation behind adding 20 days to a process without applying the same concern to all parties involved.
Right.
I don't
Representative
understand that.
DeBoyer, with all due respect, I told you the motivation.
Yeah, I
There's
said I don't
nothing
understand it.
else here that we're withholding on the motivation.
Correct. I think we should consider on a bill like this, providing that consideration to all parties involved to have a deadline.
Which parties are you referring to?
I'm talking about the local clerks, the county clerks, the elected official that is the focus of the recall. If we're going to consider timelines, additionally, the people collecting signatures, they all have a timeline. They
Yes,
all
we,
should be
we will
considered.
be having many bills come before this committee regarding timelines. However, this one is in reference to this particular timeline.
Representative Boyer.
Yep.
We'll work it back in
Thanks.
if you have some follow-ups.
Thanks, Chair.
Representative Kolazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. So it seems like a lot of the concerns that have been brought up is really just the difficulty of recalling somebody. When were a lot of the changes to Michigan's recall made? Michigan's recall law, roughly?
2013.
Oh, and who was in majority then?
Pretty sure it was the Republicans.
And who was the governor then?
Would it be Snyder?
It's- Thank you. Appreciate that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have a question that might be, I think, just helpful for our understanding. If you could outline just a general process of how a recall works, I think would be beneficial if we could get somebody to do that. Because if we're talking timelines, I think just having that knowledge out there is an important part of the discussion.
Absolutely.
Good morning. So I can speak for it from the state level. So at the state level, officers, like Representative Tsernoglou said, the officers that file with the state level, the recall petitions that would be filed would be the statewide offices, state representative, state senator, as well as any county-wide office. The petition gets filed and the Bureau of Elections has 3 business days to schedule a meeting and notice the target of the recall of the date, the time, provide a copy of the recall petition, and provide all of the materials related to the recall itself. Within that time frame, we have currently that 10 to 20 calendar day window. It leaves us with roughly 5 business days, depending on when it falls, to be able to get that meeting. The board doesn't have a set meeting space. We're very lucky that we coordinate with the Senate in order to get the Senate hearing room. But obviously the Senate takes priority over a board meeting if there's sessions, so we're limited in availability to be able to get a meeting space. So that's all has to happen in that 3 business day window. From there, the board will meet and they consider the factual, and whether the language at the top of the petition is factual and sufficiently clear. If the board says no, then the petition is rejected. There are appellate rights after that, and then, or alternatively, if the board says yes, it's the same thing. You can appeal to the Michigan Court of Appeals, and if an appeal is taken, it freezes the window for circulation of the recall petition, and then from there, it's frozen for the 40 days or until the Court of Appeals makes a decision, whichever comes first. From there, the language is good for a total of 180 days, so it can be up to a maximum of 220 days after the recall petition, after the board makes the determination on the recall petition, and then it gets submitted to the appropriate filing official, depending on who the official is that sponsors.
So just
Targets, excuse me.
thinking out loud for clarification for myself here, somebody could, in the state of Michigan, if they wanted to file recall after recall after recall every single day, and the group that would determine whether the recall moves forward or not generally meets once a month regularly. So if someone filed one every single day, there might be this situation where we're asking those folks to meet kind of constantly. So the change in Rep. Tsernoglou's bill would essentially allow for all of that to be taking place at the one monthly regular meeting, making the whole process a little bit, in my mind, a little bit more consistent for the people who have to do that work. That's the way I'm looking at this. Is that kind of the intent of the bill?
Yes, that's definitely the intent of the bill.
And then we have Representative Smith.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony, Rep. Tsernoglou. So I understand wanting to have the longer time frame if this is a problem and we have issues, but do you have, can you provide a list of instances where the boards have not been able to meet to have a quorum in the last 4 years, if, under these circumstances?
I believe the board has met consistently in order to fulfill their duty. However, as I mentioned before, we are seeing an increase in recalls. So we want to ensure that the board can continue to do their duty in a sensible manner. There's really nothing more to this than being cognizant of the fact that this is a volunteer position, that we are asking people on both sides of the aisle to participate in to ensure that our elections are functioning the way that they should. We're just being respectful of their time, and it's just a common sense change in our current timeline. And that's all it is. If we're unwilling to make that change for our, once again, bipartisan board of canvassers, then that's certainly something that we can choose. But I am just moving forward that request for us to respect their time and make this sensible change.
Thank you.
And I'll ask just one more, because I was just thinking about this. Right, these when these are, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. Vice Chair Wagella, actually, it turns out I misspoke. There have been some instances where the board was not able to meet, and I will turn it over to Mr. Fracassia.
I can think of at least 2 instances in which the Board of State Canvassers was not able to meet. I don't believe it was in the last 4 years. I want to say it was around 2019, give or take a year or two. And then in the last, in 2021, we had a 4-month period where we had to have a board meeting almost every single week because of just that time frame when they fell, where we weren't able to combine it with another meeting.
Thank you.
So my question was, knowing that these meetings are open to the public, do you feel that having a predictable time where these meetings are held, rather than them popping up because someone files a recall petition and then you have 20 days, do you feel that would actually allow for people in the state of Michigan to participate in this process better?
Absolutely. I think that should certainly be our goal.
Representative DeBoyer.
I think it's important that we also recognize that we're also modifying the terms at the County Elections Commission as well. I mean, we're focusing on the State Board of Canvassers, but my question is, have either of the individuals testifying participated in a recall hearing at a county level?
I have not.
Not aware one way or the
Okay.
other, to be honest.
In the provision for recalls is specifically designed for the people, correct? To remove an officer that they believe isn't fit to serve. Is that, are we at least on a safe assumption of the motivation behind a recall theoretically in the statute that it's in order to remove an officer that we don't believe
Certainly,
is
and
fit.
I absolutely agree with you, and I would be more than willing to work on that change
Yep.
with you going forward, Representative DeVoyer. However, that is not excluded
No, I
by
understand.
this bill. So
But-
this bill moving forward will not prevent that in any way.
When an individual's name is offered for the state board of canvassers, and the individual is reviewed and selected potentially for that position, is the terms of that job spelled out to them, requirements, how they're compensated, per diem, I think you mentioned was per diem. Like, is that spelled out to them very clearly? Do they understand that?
I believe so.
I would imagine that it's spelled out, but with something, as was noted, if recall petitions are filed, you don't know when those are going to come up. So we can provide a best estimate as to what the terms of the job will be, but we can't give a 100% certainty whether it's going to be 12 meetings a year or 30.
Right, but they understand that it's their job to review recall petitions.
I would presume so, yes.
And by the way, the vast majority of recall petitions in the state of Michigan are handled at the county level. They're not handled at the state level. So we're having, am I correct in understanding that we're,
So I do want to clarify something. So I think what we're talking about is I used the wrong term. I misspoke. I said Board of State Canvass or Board of County Canvassers,
Right.
and what I actually meant to say was the Board of County Election Commissioners.
Right. Yep.
So I did use the wrong term. However, the Board of County Election Commissioners is in this bill.
right, that's, right, and it's, but we haven't been addressing that in our questioning. We've only been talking about the State Board of Canvassers. And my question is so this is a request from the State Board of Canvassers, right? A request from the serving individuals to be allowed to have more time is what it is. Is that where the impetus of this is
Not
from?
fair to say. I don't know that it's fair to say it came from the canvassers themselves. I think our staff saw this and put the request forward. So I wouldn't necessarily want to say that those 4 individuals have asked for this change. It would benefit them, I believe. As we were working with Representative Tsernoglou to draft the bill, the question came up whether we would like to extend the same change to the counties, and we felt like there was reason to have that consistency, but that is certainly a policy decision for all of you if you want to have a different time frame at the county level.
Okay, so it is driven out of your department and out of the Board of Canvassers to add
Yes.
additional time.
Yes. That said, I would
It's
say
just not an official request.
I understand.
From the Board of Canvassers. Just, I would imagine from conversations.
Absolutely, and I think election boards are similar to other boards that we're seeing throughout the state, whether it's school boards or local governing bodies. We have a large number of decisions in this state that are made by people who are volunteer or largely volunteer and are seeing challenges finding people to fill those roles in this day and age. So I would say that if we want to continue that structure of governance the way we have it, any place we can look at making it more workable for people in those positions while still balancing the integrity of the recall process, absolutely, and the uncertainty for people whose name is up for consideration. I think those are important concerns, but hoping that just a few days change doesn't make that too detrimental to the recall process.
Would the Bureau of Elections position be that the deadline date at which a petition is defaulted as approved? Is there a reason that it's defaulted as approved?
Yeah, I think that's just a part of the statute that's been there. We could have that conversation as to what the default is.
Is there an opinion? Do you have an opinion as to why that would be? That is defaulted as approved if a hearing
I
isn't
think that
held?
would just be our speculation about why the statute was written that way. I don't know that we have any legislative history on why
Could it be that we're going to err on the side of the electorate?
it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
First off, I just want to say thank you for testifying today and bringing this forward, because I think from my view, I think it's important that we not only react to things that are happening in the state, but we also are forward thinking, and I see this bill as part of that. So with there being no further questions, the Elections Committee will go at ease.
Thank you. The Elections Committee will come back to order. All right. Just going to read in a card that we received from Sherry Ritchie from Pure Integrity Michigan Elections, Michigan Fair Elections, Stand Up Michigan, the Freedom Alliance, Mid-Michigan Women for Conservative Values. Ms. Ritchie represents all of these groups, and she opposes House Bill 5550 and 5551. Now, I will now bring House Bill 5146 before the committee, as we will be referring the bill to the Committee on Military, Veterans, and Homeland Security. Representative Burns makes a motion to refer House Bill 5146 to the Committee on Military, Veterans, and Homeland Security. Will the clerk please call the roll?
On the motion to refer, Chair Tsernoglou?
Yes.
Representatives Wagella?
Yes.
Pope?
Yes.
Colazar?
Yes.
Burns?
Yes.
Churches?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
DeBoyer?
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass. HB 5146 is reported to the Committee on Military, Veterans, and Homeland Security.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.